With more than 30 years of history and game releases under its belt, the Final Fantasy series has seen its ups and downs. For every dizzying high like Final Fantasy VII, there's an equally nauseating wet fart to counterbalance it with some questionable quality. Let's take a look at the 5 worst Final Fantasy games, in my opinion of course. We're sticking to mainline series games here. There are so many spin-offs that it's got to be a topic for another time. Number 5, Final Fantasy XIV. Now, to clarify, this is not the original Final Fantasy XIV, but the re-released A Realm Reborn version. More specifically, the game in its current state in 2023. The interesting thing about an MMO is that it's a constant evolution, and it can turn a game that would have been one of my favourites into something very different. At launch, Realm Reborn was excellent, combat felt really good, the game world was great, maps were well designed, and the story was epic. I personally played this game from the launch of 1.23b in the original version, all the way up to the end of the main story quest in Endwalker, and a couple of patches after that. What used to be really great fun slowly turned into a chore, work, something I dread getting involved with. Constantly recycling content for use in late game quests, making players rerun old content to obtain new things, leaving behind the precious new levels whatever the current expansion has granted them. Map design has grown progressively lazy, with more modern maps just being large masses of empty space to make flying mechanics seem more useful. But the kicker for me has just been the lack of innovation, the lack of shaking it up. Players have for years been predicting what kinds of content will come out from its cookie-cutter patches, and it's grown very stale. Final Fantasy XIV needs a major heel turn on its content delivery if it ever wanted to win me back. Number 4, Final Fantasy V. This is the generic Marvel movie of the Final Fantasy series. Nothing stands out. The combat was neat, but God, it was boring. Bartz was extremely dull as a lead character. Exdeath was just cookie cutter and not really worrying at all. The whole cast, to be honest, did nothing for me. The killer here was the story though. It's so generic, set in a drab, boring world with very little going on. It plods along at a frustratingly slow pace until it's not especially satisfying conclusion. The old NES and SNES games are generally pretty beloved, and I appreciate I'm probably in the out crowd here, but this game did nothing for me in terms of being memorable or enjoyable. Number 3, Final Fantasy II. Trying to get through this game is rough. I mean elephant making love to a cat rough. This one is old, and sure, they were trying something new for their second release, but this just doesn't work. The story is stale, the world dull, villains underdeveloped. 2 things stood out to me the most though. Leveling. You don't gain traditional XP here, you gain skills in different type of abilities through using them, which sounds okay in concept, but it didn't come together. The requirements for when you skill up is unclear. Trying to vary your approach using different abilities is just overcomplicated because you have no skill for where you are in the story. The other thing though, status ailments. Totally normal stuff that's expected in a JRPG, but damn, everything in this game poisons you. Dungeons are an absolute slog, a chore to get through, as the impact of ailments is just far too high. It becomes less of a gameplay mechanic and more of a nuisance. Number 2, Final Fantasy XIII. The original walking simulator dropped like a limp noodle into my PlayStation 3 back in 2010, and boy was I looking forward to this one. My hopes though were far from fulfilled. Corridor after corridor of bland, lifeless running with occasional battles. The most linear Final Fantasy game I had ever played, and to be fair, to this day it still holds that title. The story was bonkers and nonsensical, throwing out terminology straight from the start of the game with zero context surrounding what that meant until you went and read the codex pages for it, which unlock after you're already confused. Or if you followed any of the other media put out surrounding Final Fantasy XIII, which should have been considered optional as it was outside of the game itself. The combat system was as dull as literally watching paint dry. Outside of changing your character's roles, you didn't really do anything. Just tell them to auto-battle. You could pick your own abilities, but why would you? The auto battle was so good, it knew better than you. The real bugbear for me, though, was the characters. More emotional than a teenager discovering 30 Seconds to Mars, overly dramatic, insipid and frustrating in every way. And Vanille. Oh, Vanille.
You could have won me. That's we go. Hey, check it out. Fresh air. Nice.
Number 1, Final Fantasy XV. Truth be told, this could have been Final Fantasy XIII, but this one is here, I think, mostly because it was more disappointing than anything else. 15 was the first for the PlayStation 4 and the first to deliver a truly open-world experience, and expectations were really high. What we got, though, left a lot to be desired. The open world, while massive, was empty, dull, and devoid of life. Yes, it looked stunning in places, but if you were away from a road, you could be running for minutes just to reach anything interesting. Battles did away with the turn-based or menu-based systems of old and put in an action combat system that pretty much just boiled down to parry to win, with no real need to engage all that heavily with the mechanics. The characters, except for Prompto. Prompto is literally god tier.
But if anything happened to him, I would kill everyone in this room and then myself.
Noctis was just a nuisance, complaining and whining throughout. Ignis grated at me with every new recipe, and Gladio was as deep as a puddle. The story, though, was just delivered in the worst possible way, disjointed and easy to lose track of. The massive set pieces weren't enough to make up for how poorly it was delivered. You could progress the story, hit a big emotional scene, then go and do 15 hours of side quests, then resume it. It just made no sense in this type of game. 15 just got too much wrong for me, and here's hoping 16 can right some of those wrongs. Do you agree with this? What would be your least favourite of the series? Let us know, and until the next one, bye bye.